for the purpose of this webinar, we define leadership as taking responsibility for creating momentum. Taking responsibility for creating momentum. And in that context, everyone is a leader because there are different areas in your life where you need to create momentum, even different areas of your professional life. So sometimes, one of the most important areas we need to lead ourselves, is leading our career. So there are people here where the main leadership area they're working on is leading themselves. And then other times, we're leading people. It can be your manager of individual contributors, or perhaps your senior leader who is already managing leaders, so you're leader of leaders, and even have higher senior levels, you're managing functions, you're leading organizations. So all of that still falls under the category clearly of leadership. So whether it's you're leading yourself, you're leading projects, you're leading people, you're leading functions and organizations, those are all expressions of leadership. And that means that everyone joining or perhaps listening to the replay is leading something. We are all leaders. And that attitude, that approach as something that really served me very early on in my career, not seeing leadership as something to attain to years down the line when I have the title, but even in my early training days, truly seeing myself as a leader, knowing actually, leadership is about how you operate and how you do things, not just the title that you have. So please, if there's anyone here that maybe there, because I attract people at different stages of their career, most people will be, mid-level, but they don't have a leadership title yet. And sometimes I see that they're hesitant to define themselves as a leader because they're not managing anyone yet. I just want to challenge that you often have to see yourself as a leader before the title comes. It's really around, are you someone that creates momentum? Are you someone that creates results? Are you someone that drives results? That is leadership, and really seeing yourself as that will really help make the title come easier. So having said that, so the two things around leadership to understand, one, everyone here is a leader, and also really understanding that the leadership that got you to where you are won't necessarily take you to where you're going. It's a common cliche, right? What got you here won't get you to where you're going. It's a cliche, but it is true. Life is, our environment, our organizations are constantly evolving. I work across different sectors, so I know that whole organizations are under pressure, the obvious things that are going on. But even beyond that, there's so many um, um, external factors and even in the individual companies that are really actually disrupting themselves before something external disrupts them. So our organizations are continually evolving, which means if we don't want to put ourselves at risk of um, being out of touch, becoming irrelevant, then it's so important that we are also continually evolving. So leadership is not static. You cannot afford to not be evolving, and that's why resetting matters, because the risk of no resetting is that we drift or we become unduly exposed, right? Either way, we don't want that. So the evolution around us necessitates that we reset. And sometimes you're resetting, there's the continuous adjustment that's just happening because life is happening. So think back to January, you might have had plans, actions, priorities, things you wanted to focus on. But now in July, if you think back to the organization that you're in, to the team you're in, it may be looking very different. Maybe you have a new leader who has a different set of priorities. Maybe you've had one or two members, join the team who have disrupted the team, or they've changed the dynamics of the team, and the things you thought you would be able to achieve are now no longer looking realistic, or perhaps how you need to make it happen has changed. So this is why, really pausing to think about actually what I said I wanted to do or the plan I'm working on, is it still the best way to achieve what I want, given all the things that happen around. So those are like continuous adjustments, but there are also like major things that happen, what I call where people can be at an inflection point. For example, getting a new role, a bigger role, an expanded role, or joining a new organization where there's actually a new demand placed on you, where you have to reset to the new organization, how they do things. And that requires you to actually bring something different, something, tangibly different to the table. And sometimes, that's uncomfortable, and we can sometimes lose our stability in the interim until we find our grounding again. So I will call those like role inflection points. I know sometimes you're at a point where, you have options. There's a new direction you need to take. The, major personal events that may happen that really put your career at a turning point, an inflection point. And like I said, you have to bring something to something different to the table. So one of the things we're going to start with, so what I've been sharing is what necessitates a reset. So think about what's been happening in your own environment. Think back to where you are in January. Think back to where things are now. What's happening in your organization? What's different when you set your goals, when you set your plans, when you set what you were going to focus on in this year? What has shifted, and really, make note of that. If this is something that you hadn't really been present to, what is the dynamics in the organization, in the team that you're in now? What are your relationships like? There are people, what are your relationships now? Are relationships stronger? Are they strained? We know really one of the keys to succeeding at work is really having those strong relationships. So if certain relationships are straining, then that is a reason to pause and think, well, how do I recover this, or how do I resurrect this, or how do I pivot and find other sponsors or other people that are really going to have my back, because I don't want to be in a situation where I'm exposed because my relationships are not in the best place they need to be. So let's start the session with a little review around where you are in your leadership. Okay. And as I'm speaking, if you have any questions, please put your questions in the chat. In the end, at the end, I will pause and take questions. So put any questions in the chat. I will pick it up, but then at the end, we'll have some time to take questions as well. So let's start with a review. Think about where you're leading today. I said earlier the different areas of leadership. Your focus might be actually leading your career, getting yourself to where you want to be. You could be leading a team. You could be leading a project where you are, you don't have authority per se over the people, but you do have accountability for delivering the project. You could be leading a decision. Just pick one area. Is it your career, yourself, your team, a project, a decision? Pick a particular area of leadership, and think about that. And what I want you to think about next is, what are the desired results that you are getting and happy with in that area of leadership? So in the chat, let me know if you've picked something. Put a one in the chat if you've picked an area. And Faith, you can drop that first question in. What are the desired results that you're getting in the area that you've picked and that you're happy with? Let's make this practical so that you're not just listening to me, right? Let's do some workshopping. What are the desired results that you're getting and happy with? To put the results in the chat, but just put a one in the chat so I know that I'm not talking to myself and you are listening to me. So pick an area of leadership, and let me know what are the desired results that you're getting in that area and that you are happy with, because we want to know what's also working, right? And the second question I'm going to ask you to review and think about is, what's not working? What feels hard? Where do you feel stuck? Right? So kind of like thinking about the areas that we need to work on. We want to be clear on where are we getting results and where are we not quite getting, where are we not where we want to be. So what is not working? What feels hard? Where do you feel stuck? And then the third thing I'm going to ask you, can just write some bullet points around this. The third thing I'm going to ask you is, are you a confident leader or a timid one? Are you a confident leader or a timid one? So self-assessment. Be honest with yourself, either one. It's fine. Are you a confident leader or a timid one? And let's expand a little bit. What does that actually mean? A confident leader is upfront in asking for what they need and to succeed. They're upfront in driving conversations that they need to have in order to succeed. They're proactive in driving their agenda, their vision for whatever it is that they're leading in. The timid leader is more reluctant, whatever reason may be behind that reluctance, whether it's they don't want to be too much, they don't want to be too forward, they don't want to disturb people, they don't want to rock the boat, whatever it is, they are reluctant in doing what they need to do in order to drive results. So rate yourself. Are you confident or are you timid? And as we continue in the session, really bear your responses to those in mind, because a lot of the things I'm sharing, I want you to really, so that it's not just theory. You want to be reviewing and listening to them through, through the lens of those responses. So if you've gotten some points down on all of those areas, let me know. Put a two in the chat. Put a two in the chat if you've got any, if you've responded to that. Thank you, Emeka. Thank you. I did talent. Can we get more people? We go. Loads on the call. Let's see. Thank you, Molly. All right. I don't want to, let's give you another minute to think about those questions. So where are you getting results that you're happy with? What's not working? What feels hard? Where do you feel stuck? The areas you need to work on, and then really rate yourself. And confidence is a big one, right? Confidence, and I do a lot of work on confidence. Often, um, yeah, I do a lot of work on confidence, because our confidence again is not static, like so many things. A bad experience could knock your confidence more than you would ordinarily expect it to, but things happen. So that's the review. That is looking at where things are, right? And for you to make progress, it's so important to stop and think about, where are things, what's working, what's not working. And those questions are really there to give you and to help you with that. But after then reviewing where things are, what then happens? What do we do next? That's where the other part of the work that I do really comes in, like really helping people to recalibrate, because often a challenge or a difficulty is just an invitation to do things differently. It's an invitation, it's feedback that your approach is not working and something else needs to be tried, something else needs to be tested. So when it comes to recalibration, we're looking at what needs to change, what needs to evolve, and so that we can achieve the outcomes that we're looking for. So if you rated yourself as a timid leader, you need to think about what needs to change for you to move away from that position and become a more confident one. If for the things that you've identified as not working, where you're feeling stuck, what needs to change so that you can move away from there. So let's go back to the basics, right? Around how do you create results? And if you remember at the beginning, I said, the session is in really threefold. We have three broad agendas, review where we are, recalibrate, and then really talk about tools for rising. Review, recalibrate, rise. So to go back to the basics, when it comes to recalibration, whenever you're recalibrating, essentially you're saying, I need to create different outcomes. But how do we create results? How do we create outcomes? Ultimately, it's down to the actions that we're taking, right? It's actions that drive results. What drives actions? It's our thinking, right? Our thinking will drive the actions we take. Again, one step backwards. What drives how we think and what we think about? It's the knowledge that we have and the mindset that we're carrying. So knowledge and the mindset that we're carrying. What drives the knowledge and the mindset that we have? It comes down to our exposure. it's your exposure over the years, is what you've listened to, is who you've listened to in the past, is who you're listening to now, the conversations you're having, the people around you. All of that is really the bank of information that all your thinking and ultimately your actions will be based on. So when it comes to recalibrating, when we really want to look at, well, how do I recalibrate my mindset? And how do I recalibrate my actions? Often, sometimes people want to change their actions, but if you've done a lot of work, and, if you've done any significant work around change, getting people to change actions alone, it's not sustainable. If you want change that is sustainable, then you really have to help people change how they think and how they're viewing the situations. So in our session, talking about recalibration, I'm going to be talking about the two areas: recalibrating your mindset and recalibrating your actions. So first of all, let's talk about mindset, right? And really, what is mindset? And I would always say, like humorously, that mindset is essentially how your mind is set. And many of us in corporate settings, like some of the stuff that I talk about, people often don't talk about it. People talk about leadership competencies and all of those they're great, but often what lies underneath being able to sustain all of these competencies and do what we're supposed to do, when we're supposed to do it, are the more personal stuff, like the internal stuff. It's how we're seeing ourselves and the beliefs we hold. So mindset is really critical. And I'll say, it is the beliefs and assumptions that shape how you interpret and respond to situations. So mindset, how your mind is set, another way of thinking about it, the beliefs and the assumptions that shape how we interpret and respond to situations. Even listening to me now, I'm speaking, everybody is not hearing the same thing. What I'm saying, you are filtering it through whatever mindset you brought into the session. So that's why it becomes really important that we ensure that a mindset is one that is empowering, not one that sabotages or not one that limits us, because how we interpret, how we relate, interpret and respond to situations is really going to be driven by where our mindset is. And often the reality is mindset is it's a blind space up, really thinking about what's my mindset today. It's not what's at the forefront of your mind, but your mindset is revealed through the actions you take, is revealed in what you say, how you say it, and often it has to be uncovered by others. So I'll invite you to think about like conversations that maybe you were supposed to have, but you didn't have because you had assumed they had come. For example, whether it's asking for a pay rise, I can't tell you the number of times where, maybe I have been working with a client and we realize that actually, what, compared to market rates, your salary is a little bit low, and people will say, no, I can't ask for a pay rise, or I can't, and then they do, and something gets done. Sometimes it's not immediate, but other things are put in place and eventually it happens. Whether it's asking for a promotion, whether it's a transfer, asking for different conditions. But there are times where I would suggest something to someone and immediately, they'll be like, no, 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 it's not possible. And then months down the line, they realize it was possible, but their mindset then just could not entertain it. So the same thing is happening for all of us, including me, the coach. I'm not immune. I have to, be in conversations with people who can help me know where I may be limiting and sabotaging myself. And this is where coaching is really powerful, because it's not about giving you solutions. It's about helping you uncovering what may be getting in your way. So think about times as well, contributions that you never made, even though you had the insight, you had the knowledge, and then but somehow maybe you judge that it wasn't good enough, and then someone else says it and they're celebrated for it. So those are the negative sides, but there's also, I think, having the positive side where our mindset can be really, really helpful in driving us forward. So think about opportunities that you may have gotten because you were bold enough to ask for it, or bold enough to even believe that you deserved it. One of the things that really helped me early on in my career was I was quite bold. So even as a trainee, I would go to the partners and the directors in my organization when I wasn't that busy and tell them I had capacity and I wanted more work, and they would just take me along to meetings. So I got exposed to a lot of senior meetings at early on in my career because I was bold enough to ask. And I wasn't expecting people to say no. And even if they said no, it wasn't a big deal. Whereas sometimes the fear of being told no could really, really limit us such that we don't really put ourselves forward for opportunities. So let's make this practical for you and think about where you are now. Think about the area of leadership that you chose earlier, where you talked about the results that you're happy with. Now let's focus on the results that you're happy with, where things are positive. What are some of the beliefs and assumptions that are helping you to succeed? What are the beliefs and assumptions that are helping you to get those results? Because here's the thing, results don't happen. And Faith, you can put that first question in the chat. Results don't take place in a vacuum. If things are working, it's because there's something making it work. If it's not working, it's because there's something there that is making it not work. So let's talk about the things that are working, right? What are some of the beliefs and assumptions that are helping you to succeed? For example, someone who believes that they're smart and they're clever and they're deserving of the next role, of a higher role, they would carry themselves differently in the office compared to someone who doesn't believe that. So by carrying themselves differently, their presence is different, their communication is different, their energy is different. They just build a different brand that supports where they want to go. And here, voila, eventually it becomes a reality. Okay. So think about some of the beliefs that has helped you to achieve to create success in the areas where things are working. And that's one of the things I always do whenever I hit a roadblock or where something isn't working. I go back to what's working. Like, okay, what is sponsoring this result? What's making it possible? Because you can always borrow it across, right? But sometimes, we're going, and we're not really understanding how and why we are generating results in the areas that we're generating it in. But let's pause to understand, why is it working? Why is this, area of my leadership working? What is sponsoring it? And if you've done that, put a one in the chat. Put a one in the chat. Put a one in the chat. So threefold agenda, review, recalibrate, right? We're in the middle section now looking at recalibrating. So look at the area of leadership that is working. What beliefs and assumptions are helping you to succeed? Now, let's look at the other area as well, the other side. Look at, earlier on, I asked the question of, what's not working, what feels hard, where do you feel stuck? So my question to you is, look at that, go back to that, go back to what's not working, what feels hard, where you feel stuck, and what beliefs and assumptions may be limiting you there. What beliefs and assumptions may be limiting you in that area? Again, I'll give you one that could, that I see commonly. For example, it could be the fact that, oh, I'm an outsider and I don't belong. I don't belong. I'm an outsider. I'm different. Let me just, stay in my corner. Don't put myself out there too much. Believing that you're disadvantaged because you're Black. I work with a lot of, like I said earlier in my introduction, I work with a lot of African diaspora, African descent clients. And sometimes our beliefs can actually hold us back. We could be in a really, please go on mute if you're joined. We could be in an environment that is really supportive, but we are not at ease, whether because of stories we've heard, our past experiences. So we can live a bad, and yes, many of us do have, really negative experiences. We could live a bad experience, you've left the toxic environment, but the environment is still inside you. You're still haunted by it. So you're not in a positive environment, but somehow you just cannot be at ease. You cannot relax. You cannot trust people. And all of that can really actually become very limiting because energetically, you can just be giving off the wrong energy, um, either because you're so guarded or you're fearful. So all, that is a limitation. That may have come about because of a real event that negatively impacted you. But you're in a new environment that is different. But yet your what you're carrying within can actually block you from getting the full benefit and truly enjoying where you are. And somehow that is how we negative experiences continue and repeat. Okay, it could be, oh, I won't get the promotion. They won't give it to someone like me. All of those can just be beliefs. And what is also interesting about this is that it can really be so buried underneath that you're not even aware that it's present. And it takes someone skilled to really help you unpack and understand actually, this is really what's behind it. So beliefs and assumptions have to be uncovered. Um, and and it's important that you uncover it for yourself, what's helping you, what's blocking you, that will be critical to taking a different set of actions and being able to move forward. And one of the ways you actually really begin to work on elevating the mindset that you have, working with, being more informed, working with more insights is it's necessary to expose yourself to people who can help you read yourself better and see what's getting in your way. From coming to this a session like this is really helpful because you're hearing this conversation and it's triggering thoughts for you, right? It's triggering thoughts, it's triggering ideas, things are coming to your mind, and these are the sort of things you want regularly, just ensuring that you are exposing yourself to new knowledge. Because the way we grow, the way we elevate our mindset, the way we become more insightful, we are able to think better, think clearer, and therefore take better actions is actually we just become more informed, we become wiser. Right. And a lot of my sessions, that's what I'm helping clients to do, really gain new perspective because they have their own view. But really just broadening that, bringing new perspectives, challenging perspectives. Very important that you have people around you who can challenge you, because you don't want to be in silo where all your friends, everyone thinks like you, and people will buy into your story, maybe buy into you. Yeah, I was going to say buy into your excuses because we all do. We all make excuses, right? We have good reasons to keep us in a comfort zone, but you want people that would gently really challenge you. So you create that environment for yourself. That is one of the surest way to ensure that you continue to grow and you continue to be able to have the right view of your challenges. So my question to you is going to be, last question as we think about recalibrating is, where do you need to challenge your perspective and assumptions? To give you some clues, if you have if you have an outstanding, a long-standing issue, a long-standing challenge, if the same things are happening over and over again, at some point you have to pause and think, okay, what is there something I'm doing that is contributing to this? It's always our fault, but it's just really stopping to question yourself on this. Um, yeah. So I see a question in the chat that says, I suffer imposter syndrome and makes it unable for me to take risk. I have asked for opportunities for growth, but it was implied that I was too ambitious. That is so someone telling you they're ambitious. I mean, that's their opinion. I mean, so my challenge to that is, okay, they say you're ambitious, so what, right? Um, you can accept that as a criticism or as a compliment. At the end of the day, it's ultimately it's an opinion. So it's well, how do you set that aside and actually focus on what is important? So what do I need to get what I want? What do you think my gaps are? So always moving, my challenge to you or my encouragement to you is move the conversations away from someone else's opinion to actually what is helpful to you. What is the feedback there? Is it that they think you need more experience? What type of experience? And just question them and don't let the opinion block you from making further exploration around what you want. Hope that helps, Imole. So I've talked a lot about recalibrating your mindset, but obviously life doesn't take place in a vacuum. You can't just recalibrate your mindset. Yes, you can work on your mindset, but ultimately you have to take the right actions, and that's where we started from. That when it comes to we want to change our results, things are not working exactly how we want it to be, which means we need to change our actions so that we create a different set of results. We talked about creating, changing your actions alone. You have to, what is sponsoring the actions is the thinking. So how do you then, once you've worked on the mindset and make sure that's not a block, how do you ensure that you are taking the right steps that will actually move you closer? And this is another area where people misdiagnose, right? You have to become your own GP when it comes to some of these issues, or get support to become your own doctor, where you have to really diagnose what is required, what is the action that I need to take. Because if you're thinking beautifully, but you're not acting, you're not going to make progress. If you take the wrong actions, you're equally not going to make the right progress. So I'm going to invite you, choose an area of leadership where you are not seeing the results you like. So we're looking forward here. Choose an area where you're not seeing the results you like, the outcomes are not what you want. What is a new result that you would like to see? What is a new result that you like to see? And then think about what are, let's say, two actions that you would need to take to see that result. Well, as you think about that, I mean, I'll share an example to bring it alive. So, I run the business, I run my home coaching practice. Like any business, the key thing I need to do, I need to keep growing. And I grow by either signing on, keep my existing clients, or let them come back to me. I'm the preferred choice when they want coaching again in future, or I sign on new clients. Either way, for my business to grow, there is nowhere on my website where you can click and you can buy any of my programs. My business is grown through conversations. That's what I've currently designed. So for me to grow, let's say my goal is in an area where I want to create more results is getting sign on more clients, and I by necessity need to have more conversations, but not just conversations with anyone and everybody. I need to have conversations with people where my coaching, the way I coach and how I coach, will make a difference. That approach will make a difference for them. And also that there are people who are willing to invest in coaching. They're open and willing to invest in coaching. There are many people that I could make a difference for, that I could help, but they are not open, or they are open, but they're not willing. So if I'm having a lot of conversations with those people, well, my business isn't going to grow, right? So it's having conversations with the right people that can help you achieve the goal you want. And then another action I can take is I need to take steps that would generate more of those conversations, right? So for me, in terms of growing my business, those are two critical actions that I need to take. For example, posting on LinkedIn and all of that, while it's good, it's not necessary. If I'm just posting and I'm not having conversations, then that's really not going to create, or if my posting is not leading to conversations, that's not going to create the business growth that I need. So having shared my example, really think about your own example, the area where you need to see results, and think about actions that you the actions that you need to take to create that result. So for example, let's say it is that you want a promotion. You want better recognition. You have to think about, what's going to make your leaders want to give you that promotion. What's going to make them consider you promotion worthy? What are the actions? What are the evidences that you need to bring? I need to be clear on those. You need to have clear conversations so that you know that. And if you're doing all the things and for example, you're still not getting results, then you have to then ask that, okay, what hell is it that I'm being ignored, or I don't have the support that I need? And then you have to take on, you have to understand what is at the root of that, and then create a different set of actions. What you don't want to be doing is, taking the same actions and hoping something will drop. You want to be clear that the actions will generate the results that you want. So that's the bit about recalibrating your actions. You've got to get the right diagnosis. What is it that I need to do, and then actually doing it. If you have any questions, put in the chat, and I will get to it. So moving on to the third area, right? We've talked about reviewing, recalibrating. Moving on to the third area of around actually rising, right? Ultimately, right? You want to create a different set of results. You want to rise in whatever area of leadership, and you want to move forward. I think one of the things, as think about as we move towards the end of the year, is to really understand, personally, what's really going to make a difference for you. What do you want? Because we are so busy now. There's so many things that we can be doing. So many things, but is that what is most important? Is that our highest priority? Because you could get to the end of December really tired, had little time for the family, but actually, what mattered most to you, you hadn't moved it forward. And even worse is that maybe you don't even realize until much later. So now is the time to really think about, what will really make a difference? What is it that I truly not want? Not what I should want, not what people expect me to want. So for example, you might even be in a really privileged position where people think you should be going for promotion, right? Or you have a chance you have an opportunity to be promoted. But because of other things going on in your life, actually, maybe promotion is not what you want now. You actually want, more breathing space. You don't want the next role. You don't want the next bigger role there, but you might just be going along with it because that's what you're supposed to do. So just kind of, so I invite you to really think about it, the importance of running your own race. So this is the last exercise I'm going to invite you to do. Fast forward, think about, imagine is the end of the year and you're more, you're happier, you're more fulfilled in your career. What will be different from now for you to feel that? What will be different from now for you to feel that? So it's the end of the year, 31st of December. You're happier, you feel more fulfilled. What will be different from now for you to feel that? The question is on the chat, so you can read that. So pause and really think about that. Just if, a word, 2 words, 3 words, down for that. The next question I'm going to invite you to think about is really, what are your top 3 priorities for the rest of the year? What are your top 3 priorities? And I say the word 3 because if you have 3 priorities, then the reality is, it's really going to be important to rank them, because because of the way life works, right? Sacrifices have to be made. When we have competing priorities, it just means that we struggle on all fronts. So think about, what are your top 3 priorities? How do you rank them? What is most important? So that's the second question. Yeah. And Imola said, I would need to land my dream role, a role with a positive environment, great manager, and opportunities for growth. Yeah. So think back, look at that, what you've written, and then look at, okay, what are the actions that I need to be taking to increase my chances of landing my dream role? So if you think about you, Imole, it will be, well, you have to really just, get as much interviews as you can, right? The more interviews you're getting, the more practice you're getting, and also you're just increasing the chances of one of them will click. So to get as many interviews as you want, you need to work backwards. It just means I need to be making as many applications, not just any application, as many like really top applications as I can, and increasing my chances of getting through. Which may then mean, oh, do I need to find people within the organization that can support? There's so many actions that can lead backwards from that. So the final question is, thinking about your priorities, just your top priorities, what are are your resources directed towards those priorities? And this is the most important. Are your resources directed towards those priorities? Because we can be busy, tired, but like I said, it's not moving us forward. And I use my example. I write content on LinkedIn. If I'm not careful, content can take so much of my time. I'm writing and writing because I actually enjoy writing. Sometimes I'm feeling sleepy at night. I'm like, okay, let me write something, and it wakes me up. It actually energizes me. But I have to be, very mindful that I do not spend a disproportionate amount of time doing that, because there really isn't a direct correlation between me writing content and really growing my business. There's no that's not how it works. Like I shared earlier, what's more important for me to do. So earlier on, I talked about, we're here, you would have clarity. My hope for by the time we get to the end of the session is that you have clarity, you have fresh insights and perspectives that you can run away with, and you have your own recalibration plan. And if you've been following along with me, have been guiding you to create that. Understand where you are, what's working, what's not working, where is your level of confidence, because those three are important. That's what we covered in the review section. Then we talked about, then we moved to the recalibration session, and I talked about that you need to both recalibrate your actions and your mindset, looking at both. What are some beliefs and assumptions that are aiding you and what is injuring you? And then, and finally, we just looked at the section around rising. What really do you need to rise? But you need to know what you're rising to and what matters most to you, right? Isn't it? They know what they say. You don't want to climb the ladder and realize the ladder was leaning on the wrong wall. So really rising meaningfully. So as you think about, going forward the rest of the year, a few things, just as we wrap up, what are some of the things commonly that I see that stop people? I see it in my work. I'm coaching people almost every day, and these things are coming up. Um, in my coaching work, I have a six-part framework around helping people, what I call the Elevate framework. It's around moving you from where you are to where you want to be. And there are a few things that we look around that. Let's look at what really stops us. We're looking at sabotaging behaviors, which is really about how we relate with ourselves, whether it's fear, it's self-doubt, it's perfectionism, overthinking, all of those traits. They have real saboteurs that can stop you from actually moving ahead, and this rough plan that you've come, if you've been working with me, this rough plan you've come up with, they can stop you from taking action on it. And also we have, sabotaging behaviors that pertain to how we relate to others, whether it's avoidance, whether it's people pleasing, whether it's being really judgmental, whatever it is, whether it's carrying our own bias. All of that can really interfere with how we relate with people, and then end up sabotaging what we want to create for ourselves. And then thirdly, we have like structural issues where people are unclear around their next steps. They don't know what their priorities should be. They don't know what they need to be focusing on. They just don't know. They're at a crossroad. They're not clear on how to make a decision. And or maybe there's just a lack of systems for doing what it is that they need to do. They don't have the know-how. All of those things will stop. And yeah, and my work, the work I do is around helping people move forward, helping people gain clarity, gain that confidence, build capacity, and work on all those things that can really stop them from realizing their plan. So if any of this really strikes you as relevant and you'd like to have a conversation, then feel free to reach out to me and we can have a conversation around how I could support you if that's the right thing for you. The work I do is around coaching and helping people recalibrate. So I hope this has been helpful and you are walking away with a little bit more clarity, a little bit more insight around what needs to change and where you need to shift to help you move forward. I'd love to take any questions. If anyone has any questions, put them in the chat, or you could also unmute and I will take your questions, or you can indicate, raise your hand, and I will take your questions. But thank you to everyone that has joined live, and also thank you to anyone that is watching the replay. I know quite a number of people reached out to me saying they wouldn't be able to join live.